Thank you for joining us for today's video presentation. After this video teaching, Brenda and I invite you to visit our website, where you will find many free resources and our video archives of previous teachings. Our bookstore has all of our current books and many of our teachings available on DVD. Also, right on the home page is the sign-up form for our email list, where you will receive our exclusive monthly newsletter. With the newsletter, you will get access to exclusive teachings, Bible research tools and resources, a monthly biblical calendar and Bible reading schedule following the traditional Torah portions, and other exclusive materials and access to future special events. We know that you will enjoy the teaching today. Thank you for joining us. Shalom and be blessed.
We are all familiar with the shortest verse in the Bible, John 11:35, Jesus wept. Children in Sunday school classes like to memorize this verse to earn their gold star for memorizing a Bible verse. And it is a good verse for children to memorize, demonstrating that Yeshua experienced the depths of grief at the death of his good friend Lazarus, and compassion for the grief that Mary and Martha experienced at the death of their brother. Today we are going to look at the 5 times that the Bible records that Joseph wept. What circumstances brought about Joseph's weeping? How does the process of repentance parallel these instances of weeping? Finally, how does Joseph's weeping foreshadow Yeshua's grief over Jerusalem? I'm Brenda Cathcart, and this is Shadows of the Messiah. Joseph's 10 older brothers hated him and sold him into slavery. They led their father Jacob to believe that Joseph had been torn apart by wild animals. They thought that everything would be much better after they rid themselves of their hated brother that their father favored over them. Instead, Jacob's grief over the loss of Joseph left a pall over the entire family. Jacob never ceased grieving. Genesis 37, 34, and 35. Then Jacob tore his clothes, put sackcloth on his waist, and mourned for his son many days. And all his sons and all his daughters arose to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. And he said, I shall go down into the grave to my son in mourning. Thus his father wept for him. 20 years later, a famine in the land caused Jacob to send his 10 oldest sons to Egypt to buy grain. This begins the reconciliation between brothers and the reunification of Joseph and his father. Joseph set up a test to see what kind of men his brothers had become in the 20 years they were separated. He accuses the brothers of being spies and tricks them into revealing that they had another brother, their youngest brother Benjamin. This is exactly what Joseph wanted. He needed an excuse to get them to bring Benjamin with them to Egypt so he could observe how they treated him. Genesis 42:15. In this manner you shall be tested. By the life of Pharaoh you shall not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Joseph's brothers were greatly distressed. They knew what bringing Benjamin to Egypt would cost their father. Jacob had sent all the brothers except Benjamin to Egypt to buy grain. Benjamin was Joseph's full brother. Both were sons of Jacob's beloved wife Rachel. Even 20 years after Joseph's supposed death, Jacob wouldn't let Benjamin travel far from him. The 10 older brothers recognized the calamity that faced them and rightly attributed it to their earlier sin of selling Joseph. Genesis 42:21 and 22. Then they said to one another, we are truly guilty concerning our brother, for we saw the anguish of his soul when he pleaded with us, and we would not hear. Therefore this distress has come upon us. And Reuben answered them, saying, Did I not speak to you, saying, Do not sin against the boy? And you would not listen. Therefore, behold, his blood is now required of us. This is the first instance of Joseph weeping. Joseph heard their confession and wept. Genesis 42:23 and 24a. But they did not know that Joseph understood them, for he spoke to them through an interpreter, and he turned himself away from them and wept. Joseph wept when his brothers acknowledged that they sinned against him. He wept when they realized this judgment was caused by selling Joseph into slavery. Although Joseph was encouraged that they acknowledged their sin, it wasn't enough to convince Joseph that they had truly changed. Admitting intellectually that they had acted wrong is one thing, but had their behavior changed? Did they really have a change of heart? Joseph continued the test. He imprisoned Simeon and sent the other 9 brothers home with grain for their families. It wasn't Joseph's intent to harm his brothers. He needed to know what manner of men they had become. Joseph's brothers delayed returning to Egypt as long as they could. Even though Simeon was being held prisoner, the prospect of bringing Benjamin to Egypt was worse than leaving Simeon there. Even though Jacob mourned now for both Simeon and Joseph, he couldn't bear the thought of allowing Benjamin to leave his side. Genesis 42:36. And Jacob their father said to them, "You have bereaved me. Joseph is no more. Simeon is no more. And you want to take Benjamin? All these things are against me." Finally, Jacob had no choice. The famine was severe. They had eaten all the grain that they had brought back from Egypt. They needed more grain or they would all die. All the brothers now left for Egypt and appeared before Joseph. At last, Joseph could observe how they treated Benjamin. Joseph began by inviting them to eat lunch with him. In actuality, Joseph would eat apart and observe their interactions with each other. He was able to do this because Egyptians would not eat food with the Hebrews. Joseph, of course, was dressed and behaving like an Egyptian. Genesis 43:32. So they set him a place by himself, and them by themselves, and the Egyptians who ate with him by themselves, because the Egyptians could not eat food with the Hebrews, for that is an abomination to the Egyptians. Joseph made his brothers uncomfortable by seating them in their birth order. Then he gave Benjamin 5 times as much as his other brothers. Genesis 43:33-34. And they sat before him, the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth. And the men looked in astonishment at one another. Then he took servings to them from before him, but Benjamin's serving was 5 times as much as any of theirs. So they drank and were merry with him. Joseph singled out Benjamin by giving him a larger portion. This indicated that Benjamin was greatly favored. Joseph himself had been singled out for favor when his father Jacob had given him the coat of many colors. Joseph's brothers hated him for this sign of favoritism, but when Joseph singled out Benjamin, they did not treat Benjamin differently. They drank and were merry with Joseph and Benjamin. This was good, but it still was not enough. How would the brothers act if Benjamin was in peril? Would they take the opportunity to be rid of another brother, another son of Rachel? Joseph set up another test. He had a valuable silver cup supposedly used by Joseph to divine the future. In this sense, the cup had both physical and sentimental value. Joseph had his steward place it in Benjamin's sack and then, of course, discover it there. The steward demanded that the one who had the silver cup be put into slavery to Joseph. Genesis 44:10. And he said, "Now also let it be according to your words. He with whom it is found shall be my slave, and you shall be blameless." The brothers were given the option right there where the cup was found to cut their losses, leave Benjamin behind, and return to their families in Canaan. They chose to go with Benjamin and plead on his behalf. Judah, the one who had taken the lead in selling Joseph, now took the lead defending Benjamin. Judah offered to become a slave in Benjamin's place. Genesis 44:33-34. Now therefore, please let your servant remain instead of the lad as a slave to my lord, and let the lad go up with his brothers. For how shall I go up to my father if the lad is not with me, lest perhaps I see the evil that would come upon my father? This brings about the second instance of Joseph weeping. Genesis 45, 1 and 2. Then Joseph could not restrain himself before all those who stood by him, and he cried out, "Make everyone go out from me." So no one stood with him while Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he wept aloud, and the Egyptians and the house of Pharaoh heard it. Joseph wept because his brothers' hearts had truly been changed. He wept because now at last he could reveal himself to his brothers. He hoped that they would receive him now with love and not hatred. But when he revealed himself, they received him not with the love he hoped for, but with dismay. Joseph reassured them that it was really him and that he didn't harbor any ill will toward them. He had forgiven them. Genesis 45, 5. But now do not therefore be grieved or angry with yourselves because you sold me here, for God sent me before you to preserve life. His brothers finally accepted him, bringing about the third time that Joseph wept. Genesis 45, 14 and 15. Then he fell on his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, and Benjamin wept on his neck. Moreover, he kissed all his brothers and wept over them, and after that his brothers talked with him. He had accepted his brothers, and his brothers had accepted him. Their lives had changed. They no longer hated their brother. This process of forgiveness and reconciliation is one that we all must go through. When we have sinned, our first step toward reconciliation with each other and with God is to acknowledge the sin. The second step is to allow that change of mind to change our heart. Judah and his brothers showed that change of heart by standing with Benjamin. Finally, a change of heart must lead to a change of life. Judah and his brothers showed that change by releasing their hatred of Joseph and receiving him with love. There is a fifth time that Joseph weeps. Long after this story concludes, after Jacob dies, Joseph's brothers begin to doubt that Joseph had really forgiven them. They send to Joseph in their father's name to beg for forgiveness. Genesis 50, verse 17. Thus you shall say to Joseph, I beg you, please forgive the trespasses of your brothers and their sin, for they did evil to you. Now please forgive the trespass of the servants of the God of your father. And Joseph wept when they spoke to him. Joseph wept because they didn't believe that they had been forgiven. He once again reassures them of his forgiveness and that he would continue to provide for them. In this story, Joseph is a type of Messiah. When we sin, we not only sin against others, we sin against God and Yeshua. As we come to repentance, Yeshua weeps as we go through each step of repentance. He weeps when we acknowledge our sin. He weeps when we have a change of heart, and he weeps when our lives change in response to our change of hearts. Yeshua also weeps when we doubt our forgiveness and rehash the sins of our past. Joseph's story is also prophetic. When Yeshua was on earth, he wept that, like Joseph, his own people rejected him. Matthew 23:37. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the one who kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to her. How often I wanted to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you were not willing. One day, his people will acknowledge that Yeshua is the Messiah. Hosea 5:15. I will return again to my place till they acknowledge their offense. Then they will seek my face, and in their affliction they will earnestly seek me. They will have a change of heart and weep for all that they have missed. Zechariah 12:10. And I will pour on the house of David and on the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and supplication. Then they will look on me whom they pierced. Yes, they will mourn for him as one mourns for his only son, and grieve for him as one grieves for a firstborn. They will accept Yeshua as their Messiah and cry out, Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Matthew 23:39. For I say to you, you shall see me no more till you say, Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. The fourth time Joseph weeps is when he is once more reunited with his father. Genesis 46:29. So Joseph made ready his chariot and went up to Goshen to meet his father Israel. And he presented himself to him and fell on his neck and wept on his neck a good while. Joseph went to meet his father at Goshen, the place he had prepared for them to live, the place where he could provide for his family and they could live at peace. Yeshua has also prepared a place for us. He will weep with joy to receive us and to reunite us with the Father. Thanks for watching today. I'm Brenda Cathcart, and this has been Shadows of the Messiah. Shalom and be blessed.